Future Sense is a podcast edited from the radio show of the same name, broadcast on Bay FM in Byron Bay, Australia at bayfm.org. Hosted by Nick Jeans and well-known international futurist Steve McDonald, Future Sense provides a fresh, deep analysis of global trends and emergent technologies. How can we identify the layers of growth, personally, socially, and globally? What are the signs missed, the truths being denied? Science, history, politics, psychology, ancient civilizations, alien contact, the new psychedelic revolution, cryptocurrency and other disruptive and distributed technologies, and much more. This is Future Sense. YouTube FM. It's, of course, the 16th of March, Monday, the 16th of March. My goodness, the year is already zooming by and so much is going on. Thanks for your texts coming in regarding everything. Lots of stuff to say. As I said, we're waiting also on a piece from Mia Armitage, our community newsroom editor and main news person in the station. And we will be hopefully getting that from her, talk with local Lennox Head GP Dan Ewald, an adjunct professor and primary advisor to the North Coast Primary Health Network, fairly soon. So we'll probably play that towards the end of the show. I'm now going to play some pieces from John L. Petersen. Just talking there to Steve McDonald, my co-host, who's over there, just visited John and recorded these pieces with Mitch Schultz, who's also often on this show. And as we said, that John is considered to be one of the most informed futurists in the world. Now, there's quite a few pieces here. I'm going to play what I played this morning. We'll see how far we go with everything going on. And he does range very widely and very deeply, and it's pretty out there, some of it. It's pretty out there. And of course, you are listening to Future Sense, so you're going to get a bit of that here. And I just should say that there's nothing that we say on this show that we are personally saying this is the truth. These are just other ways of approaching other ideas, other ways of looking at things that may be valuable to you. You do your own research. You do your own thinking about everything. My personal feeling is, have your beliefs about anything. Have your beliefs, but don't believe in them too much. That becomes too fundamentalist. It closes down conversation. John Petersen is one of the world's top futurists, certainly is in the business of looking at all sorts of things from all sorts of angles in order to try and get the best estimation of what's going on. That doesn't mean he's right. It just means that he's looking at information that most of us do not look at most of the time. That's what a futurist does. Now, he was a graduate electrical engineer originally. He also promoted rock concerts, produced conventions. He worked as a DJ, among other things. And he also had a lot of government and political experience, including stints at the National War College, the Institute for National Security Studies, the Office of the Secretary of Defense, and the National Security Council staff at the White House. He was a naval flight officer in the U.S. Navy. He served in the Vietnam and the Persian Gulf Wars, both, and has had served in senior positions for a number of presidential political campaigns, and was an elected delegate to the Democratic National Convention in 1984. He has twice been the runner-up to be Secretary of the Navy. So this man is a heavyweight. Indeed, in 1989, he founded the Arlington Institute, as I said earlier, not-for-profit, future-oriented research institute. The Arlington Institute operates on the premise that effective thinking about the future is impossible without casting a very wide net. And this is what he talks about in much of the following that I'm going to be playing this morning. He ranges widely. The man is, he's getting on in years, clearly, so he stumbles and fumbles a little bit around, and I did the best quickly yesterday to edit some of that out so that we get the clear stuff as clear as possible. But he does go on a little bit, and I acknowledge that. However, have a good listen. If you are interested to this, have a good listen to this man, because he really touches on some quite brilliant things, in my opinion. He is actually an award-winning writer. Petersen's first book, The Road to 2015, Profiles of the Future, was awarded Outstanding Academic Book of 1995 by Choice Academic Review, and remained on the World Future Society's bestseller list for more than a year. His co-authored article, The Year 2000, Social Chaos or Social Transformation, regarding the Y2K situation, was one of the most highly acclaimed writings on Y2K at that time. His 1988 book-length report, The Diffusion of Power, An Era of Realignment, was used at the highest levels of American government as a basis for strategic planning. He's a past board member of the World Future Society, writes on the future of aviation for Professional Pilot magazine, and is the chairman of the board of directors of the Charles A. and Anne Morrow Lindbergh Foundation, and many other things. This guy is not a lightweight. You can check out arlingtoninstitute.org. That's the website. And I'm going to play some of these segments. This is the first piece where he talks about a bit of a summary of, we talk often here on this show, as you know, the work of Claire W. Graves. He doesn't mention Graves specifically here, but talks about the change and the evolution of the planet and the transition times between eras, between paradigms that may occur. And he goes pretty far out here, but he gets further out as we go forward. So let's have a bit of a listen to John Petersen here from the Arlington Institute. On Bay FM 99.9, it's 9:53.
I'm John Petersen, and I'm a futurist, and I'm the founder and the president of the Arlington Institute, which is a think tank that I put together about 30 years ago. And we're located in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, about 100 miles from Washington, and Baltimore up in the mountains.
So, give us a summary, maybe in a minute or two, of what you understand about this big consciousness shift that's going on in the world.
From what we understand about how the world works and this reality works, there is a kind of a universal template. There's a universal pattern of evolution, and however you define it, and however it comes from, whether you're a Darwinian or someone else, there is constant change and upgrading and evolution in terms of animals and plants and human beings, of course. And there are the dynamics of that transition and that process can be mapped going back to the earliest things that we understand, like single cellular life or multiple cellular life and vertebrates and mammals and so on. And they have a common kind of pattern that's underneath that evolution. And that there are long periods of time that are then followed by subsequent periods that are 1/10 of the length of the time that was before them, and they constantly getting shorter and shorter and shorter. So they start with billions of years and then go to millions of years, and then hundreds of thousands of years, and then tens of thousands of years, and so on. And each one of these transitions is an extraordinary kind of jump. Evolutionary biologists call them punctuations. They go from one level up to the next level. And those transitions, for instance, not only are the periods of time, the eras, becoming shorter and shorter, but the transition times are getting shorter. So the time between single cellular life and multiple cellular life is billions of years or something like that. And it keeps getting shorter by, again, a factor of 10. And so you're into a periods of time, for instance, where you moved into cities and towns, they became active in organized agriculture, and then when humans went into cities and towns, and written language first started up, and then you find yourself 500 years ago or so when Gutenberg invented movable type, and humans started to fundamentally change the way that ideas got transmitted and proliferated across all of the species. And each one of those transitions is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. So the one associated with movable type was maybe 300 years. And if you then projected that further and you said computers and information technology represented a similar kind of extraordinary kind of change, then it would be about a 30-year transition. And then you can easily see the progression. The next one would be 3 years, and so on. And so the period of time, the transition periods are getting shorter and shorter. And at the same time, each succeeding era, although shorter, has an extraordinary kind of increase in the amount of information content, knowledge, You can measure it any number of ways. Complexity. And again, by a factor roughly of about 10. So you get shorter and shorter periods with extraordinary kind of explosions of information, and so you get an exponential curve. And that is what we're writing, and now we're into what appears to be a dramatic kind of transition into a new space where the essence of who we are and as human beings is going to fundamentally kind of change in a very short period of time. And the characteristics of that kind of change is an evolution of the species away from being just physically oriented on the planet to kind of the linear scientific paradigm that we've all grown up with, to being this expanded multidimensional kind of space where we're not only physical, but we have this engagement with the larger multidimension, other dimensions of reality, and we become, if you will, almost citizens of or participants and citizens in the larger sphere of activity. And what that means, kind of in practical terms, it seems to me, is that the folks at the beginning of that, or at the leading edge of that transition, start to see themselves in a different way in the context of this reality. I live here in an area with a lot of woods and trees and things, and I literally come out in the morning and I talk to the trees because I see them as an integral part of kind of this larger kind of reality that I live in. And let me assure you that as an engineer and the way I was raised as a conservative Christian and out of the Midwestern part of the United States, that's not the way I was raised. And so there's this notion of this expanded kind of sense of who you are and how you integrate into the larger kind of reality. And, you know, you can easily project that into engagement with other life forms that are not terrestrial, you know, call them celestial or stellar or whatever you would like to. And that seems to me this natural kind of evolutionary kind of process that the humans are moving into a new stage, and that kind of the character of that kind of transition is one of higher kind of levels of awareness and consciousness commonly caused, where you see yourself in larger and more integrated kind of terms.
Bay FM 99.9, organic community radio. Harvested fresh every day.
Yeah, we're listening there to John L. Petersen, who's the founder of the Arlington Institute in West Virginia. Talking some far-out stuff there, but it's going to get further out, so stay tuned. And thanks for your texts coming in. I'm going to read this one because it is kind of important from a regular listener and a double subscriber to Bay FM. Nikki Ramone, Mr. Wombat. I mentioned before that in this region, sometimes we think that we're immune to things. He says, we are not immune to anything up here, let alone the anti-vaccine movement, which itself is another issue. We have the most visited town region in Australia by international people fresh off the aeroplanes, often arriving within hours from overseas. We have a local uni that feeds off foreign students, also fresh off the plane. They even had one case of COVID-19 last week at Southern Cross University from a visiting lecturer who tested positive, then closed at Lizardmore, he says Lizardmore, and Gold Coast campuses for a day, and told all those who'd been in contact with him all the space to self-isolate. But I would go so far, says the writer here, to say that at least one of those told to self-isolate would have gone to the Eat the Street festival in Lismore on Saturday, where people walk around in close proximity to each other, eating food, licking their fingers, and exchanging cash, which is known to contain traces of, well, all sorts of other things, and then lick their fingers and so on. Makes self-isolation, restoring, polishing and detailing classic motorcycles, which is what Nikki does, whilst listening to 99.9, a much more attractive proposition. Thanks, Nikki, for that. And certainly it's true that the self-isolation thing all sounds very good. It's good to give people responsibility for themselves, and I certainly am not in support of literally locking people up and using the military or the police to do so. However, if you're going to self-isolate, you're going to have to do the right thing and actually do it. Be back in just a short time, and we'll play the next piece of the interview here with John Petersen from the Arlington Institute. You're tuned to Future Sense, 99.9 Bay FM. You're resonating right now on Future Sense with Steve McDonald and Nick Jeans. Yeah, tuned to Bay FM. It's 10:06 here on Future Sense with Nick Jeans flying solo today, and we did talk to my co-host Steve McDonald over there in Washington Dulles Airport, waiting to find a way to get out or somewhere to go somewhere. It's I'm sure pretty well everyone out there must have friends, loved ones, someone out there in the world seeking to go somewhere or to get home. And of course, as you would know now, if they are coming home, they're going to also be self-isolation for 2 weeks, even if they're Australian citizens. Also this morning, you may have heard that Woolworths and I think IGA, I'm not sure about Coles, have designated from tomorrow morning from 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. in the morning, the first hour, to be just for pensioners and for disabled people to do shopping, because clearly those are the people who are finding it much harder to battle the many people in the supermarket. So far, I personally, and hopefully you haven't seen any sort of bad behaviour, so to speak, in local supermarkets, but it does exist in other places, has existed in Australia, has happened overseas too, and we don't want that. So please give the opportunity for those less capable, less able than yourselves to stock up wherever they need to do so. And I think also be judicious about stocking up, clearly, because if you start taking everything from the shelves, then that's just not fair, is it? Let's play the next section of this interview with John L. Petersen from the Arlington Institute, one of the top futurists in the world. And as I said, preempting this before, as a futurist, this man listens to much information which many people will find crazy, out there, on the edge, fringe stuff, conspiracy theories and the like. But this is what a futurist does, actually, to figure out what actually is the best way to find information that details trends that are moving towards the future. And they may be crazy trends. Galileo once did some crazy stuff and actually thought, hey, everything doesn't revolve around the Earth, and they all thought he was nuts. But that wasn't the case, was it? So let's have a listen to this. John L. Petersen here. And a question from Mitch Schultz about... this is from Steve, actually, this question about the pattern of change and how things move from stability to chaos, the kind of chaos we're in now, and then to eventually to a new order. We talk about this kind of thing on the radio here, and how paradigms collapse as new ones emerge, or vice versa, new ones emerge as one collapses. Someone once said, it's almost like new sprouts come out of the compost of the old, and to worry too much about the old doesn't give enough energy or thought or momentum to the new things emerging. And of course, sometimes those new things are difficult to hook into, difficult to understand, because they reach outside your purview, outside your belief system. They reach beyond your value system, beyond your comfortable zone. So given all that, stay open to things that are said generally without going crazy, because there are some crazy conspiracy theories out there. Yes, there are some really nutty things going on in the world, but there's also, on the fringes, some real truth that can be plumbed from those depths, I would suggest. Here on Bay FM, you're tuned to Future Sense.
Let's talk a little about the pattern of change, in that, the kind of slippery dip profile where we go from stability down into chaos and then back up to a new level of stability again. And also this parallel thing we've got happening where the old paradigm is collapsing at the same time as the new one's rising.
Yeah, sure. There's a very interesting kind of underlying principle that becomes obvious if you study these kinds of things and try to understand how this whole process works. And that is, and in a sense, it's Einstein distilled it when he talks about in kind of famous terms now about saying that you can't solve a problem from the same level in which it was designed, and that you've got to be at a different level. That you have to see it from a different point of view. And in practical terms, what that means is that, or in just everyday kind of practical terms, is that you have to get yourself to a different vantage, to where you break out of or extract yourself from the constraints and the dogma and all of the history and the other kind of things that you brought with you in order to progress. I mean, that's what progression is, all right? I mean, it's change. It's something different. But in larger scale, in social kind of terms, in species or cultural or what other terms, it almost means humans don't like to change. Humans do not like to. They want predictability. They want consistency. They want the ability to plan and anticipate, and all of that is antithetical to change, and it's really tough when you have large scale change, and we don't have a history of knowing how to deal with that. We are not taught how to deal with ongoing, constant kind of change, and how you are intrinsically kind of adaptive and open and agile, and the other kind of things that are central to being able to reconfigure yourself to something else. And so the mechanism that gets you into that kind of space is that you get driven into a corner, and whether this is in personal kind of terms of relationships or personal issues and problems, the way you solve the problem is that you get driven into a corner where there are no other options, which then force you to drive you up to another dimension, to where you see the world in a different way. And people and psychologists and therapists and other people to describe it in various kinds of terms, but that's the basic idea, is that you cannot solve it from there, so you've got to, whatever the environmental kind of pressures are, to drive you up to another space. And so that's the process that I think is going on this planet right now, is that humanity is being driven into essentially a cul-de-sac, into a corner from which all of the stuff that we brought with us in terms of history and experience and knowledge and presumptions, none of it kind of freaking works. I mean, there's no way you can get there from here. And what you've got to constantly, and when you get into extremis, when you're finally without any other options, that becomes obvious that you can't do that. You are forced into another place. You're forced into another place just because of the physical problems or the emotional problems or whatever it turns out to be. But you start to see the world in a different way because you let go of all of the things that you've been carrying around that have constrained and tied you into a paradigmatic kind of framework. And so I think that's what's happening now. And so there is within this kind of model, there's a new world out on the back end of that. There's an absolute new world that comes out of the back end of that. It's a different level, and it operates by definition in fundamentally different ways. Reality does not make sense in that new world from the previous, from this world where, it's a different set of logic, and it's different understanding, and it's different perceptions and different values. It's a different world. It's a new world. And so what we're in the middle of is this kind of collapse of the old world, which you're watching implode all around us. And what's emerging are the threads that are coming together for the tapestry of what's going to be the new world. And it's an extraordinary, amazing kind of period of time because nobody gets to play in the middle of this space. for all of human history. There's never been an opportunity to literally build a new world, and be the leading edge of a new human, essentially, which is necessarily what's going to come out of all of this. And it's not, to me at least, it's not really clear what this new world really is going to be. It could be any of a number of things, and which is why I work with scenarios, alternative worlds, and so that you can kind of look across them all, because who knows what's going to happen between now and then, because you can't predict the future. Any good futurist knows that. And so it's a fascinating time where you've got the collapse of the old world and all of the old institutions and the systems and the mindsets and the principles, and the emergence of this new kind of integrated, larger, more conscious kind of perspective that is going to allow human beings as a species, certainly as a small, or probably a small number, to populate and become the basis for this new world.
Bay FM 99.9, 0.1 below boiling.
You tune to Bay FM 999, it's 10:17 here. And certainly, as I've been saying, regarding anything that we broadcast on this show, it is the opinion of ourselves and of those we interview. It is not the opinion of the station, and we certainly don't claim that anything that is spoken here is the truth about anything. It is just other ways of seeing and looking at things. I think John Petersen, as a world-renowned futurist, is certainly worth listening to. He's certainly out there, even for me at times, and you'll hear that in the next section I'll play shortly. But I think very, very worth having listening to, and I really liked what he said there. You know, any good futurist knows that you can't predict the future. I think that's really important, and no matter what we think we know, whether you're a futurist or you're a scientist, it's doubtful whether we absolutely know which way things are going to unfold. So with regards to the current crisis of the coronavirus, of course, then the best we can do is to, as I've been saying endlessly here this morning, is to be very discerning and judicious about how to protect yourself and those you love, and be more careful than you think you should be. I think that's, I'm finding myself doing that now too, because I tend to be someone who doesn't really worry about things overall, doesn't give a lot of credence to those kind of dangers that are pushed out there by the media. Not saying they don't exist, but the way that they're pushed out. But nevertheless, I'm finding myself to be a little bit more discerning about what I do and the like. So I think that's good advice generally for all of us.
You're tuned to Future Sense with Nick Jeans and Steve McDonald. Engage, emerge, activate, and spiral up.
Yeah, spiral up. Well, don't spiral down. That's probably not helpful, but be practical indeed. And we did talk to Steve McDonald over there in Washington. We got cut off, we got back on, and I've been playing some of the pieces that he and Mitch Schultz, the Texan elf, for those who listen to the show know him well, interviewed John L. Petersen from the Arlington Institute the other day, and I'm playing some segments of that. I'm going to play one more segment. This is going out even a bit further, where Mitch asks about the most exciting things that are coming, and it's in a sense, it's a good salve today to think about the larger future in a more positive way. Are we indeed collapsing? Is the whole of civilization actually going through such a crisis that everything is going to come down? And if so, what are the qualities of that? What are the connections that might be coming that we aren't aware of, that we don't even believe in perhaps? And how can we in fact prepare if indeed the world is sort of falling apart, which is pretty hard to argue with, and what might emerge from that on a more positive way? It's a tricky conversation. Let's have a listen to this. This is another 7 or 8 minutes of this, and then we'll be back. And as I said, we'll be talking or playing the interview that Mia Armitage had this morning with the GP from Lennox Head. Here we go. This is futurist John L. Petersen, and first up, Mitch Schultz here on Bay FM 999. You're tuned to Future Sense.
The world that's emerging, and if you were to say, okay, I can make a prediction or something, what would be some of the most exciting things that you sense that are coming of that new world?
Well, trying to guess about what the new world's going to be is very. I mean, I think about that all the time. I mean, I'm a futurist after all, and so. But it's fascinating because there's an underlying principle about these periods of time, these historical periods of great change, these paradigmatic shifts, and they are, and one of the most fundamental principle that I carry around with me all the time is that you cannot make sense of the world that is going to emerge from the position of the previous era. So in trying to think about what this new world might look like, what you've got to do necessarily is, again, got to get outside of the box. You got to go find sources that are not part of the past or the status quo, because they are locked into the present kind of paradigm. And so that then leads you into kind of interesting and weird people who are out working the edges, and whether they're channels or psychics or whatever they turn out to be, they are not they're not part of the standard kind of model, if you will, of how this all works. And when you get out into those kinds of folks, and by the way, from a practical futurist point of view, if you're working yourself up an exponential curve into a place that nobody's ever been before, and you really are seriously interested in trying to understand what that might be, then it's kind of stupid to go back to these guys and say what that might, because they got no idea. So you got to find yourself some of these sources, and what you necessarily have to do is go. It's unconventional. The unconventional kind of sources, and like I say, whether they're psychics or otherwise, what they're tied into is this larger understanding of reality that is going to be the kind of the core kind of organizing notion of what this new world is up here. I mean, and so there are, the way this works is that as this world evolves, there are things that pop up all over and start to emerge within the corpus of the species that are new ideas about economy and new ideas about, all of these things that finally kind of come together at some point and start to become the core kind of set of organizing ideas of this new world. Well, if you work yourself out to these unconventional people who, and you got to be pretty selective on this because there's a lot of weird stuff out there. But if you go out and you start to hear kind of common themes, and the common themes are things like this new human will have the ability to have telepathy. That conversation and vocal conversation, the way that we do it, is not necessary. And anybody who's lived with somebody for a long time knows that after a while, every once in a while, what they're going to say, and it's kind of like that. And only far more. There's also manifestation. What comes out there's this constant notion that says that consciousness is causal, and as you work yourself up there and learn how to influence and to shape and to manage your consciousness and how you think, and to be sensitive to subtle things in ways that you haven't been before, then what happens is that you can start to manifest reality in terms that you've always done but never known that you were doing. And so it becomes the ability to do that in quite a different way. Now, that is the mindset, the perspective, the essence of how you deal with the implosion of the old world, which is happening all around us, and in being able without fear and with a sense of competence and a clarity about where you're going, to be able to start to transit up this path to this new world. It's a really central issue about this whole process, because when the old world implodes, when the political system collapses, when the whole scientific thing, when you have catastrophic kind of stuff, when diseases and coronaviruses and whatever it is all to do this, what it's all doing is going to your sense of security, your sense of structure, your sense of principles and rules and operating instructions and all of that stuff that you came with. And if that all collapses, then you're tethered. You're an untethered balloon. You're just floating around there without anything. And so the question is, in that context, is how do you get your personal stuff together such that you are able to navigate and transit into that new space with a new emergent, new human kind of sense of purpose and direction that discounts the collapse of all of what you see all going on around you. And that, it seems to me, is the essential kind of core characteristics of this emergent new human, is that they see themselves in different ways. They see the external reality at kind of an arm's length, that they have not internalized it, and they're not certainly generating a lot of stress about it. And more importantly, they have whether it's explicit or implicit, they have a clear idea of an emergent new world. They have hope. I mean, if you do not have hope in the middle of all of this thing, it's all going to come unglued. And so, from a personal point of view, and so what you're looking for is essentially, how do you maintain hope through this? And the way you do that is to access and shape and develop this new sense of what a human is, and from the inside out. The very interesting kind of thing to me, I think, in all of this is, how do you, as this increasingly collapses, as it increasingly looks horrible or catastrophic or disruptive, how do you hold on to and build and embellish that sense of this new, of who you are in this broader sense, and by the way, that it's all going to be okay, because this is a benign, a loving kind of world at its essence. And there's purpose and direction to this, and we're not the first ones that have gone through this, and we have help from other dimensions and so on and so on. You're not by yourself in all of this. And once you start to get all of that, then it becomes a really exciting kind of ride, because then you're looking for and going to some place that nobody's ever been before, and by the way, you get a chance to shape it and build it and be part of that, and that's what's exciting to me.
That was John L. Petersen from the Arlington Institute in West Virginia, one of the world's top futurists with quite an incredible CV. He's not a crazy dude, but he's talking some far-out stuff there, and I do like the fact that he's talking very positively at the end there. And in the light of everything that's going on the planet and what's happening right now around the world, perhaps even if you're personally touched already in one way or the other, to remain as positive as you can, and perhaps to see a light at the end of the tunnel, however you particularly configure that for you at this time, because of course we are all different. Our value systems, our needs, our desires are all different, and all of that needs to be acknowledged. But at the same time, we're all in this together. If you're interested in more of John L. Petersen from the Arlington Institute, you can go to the arlingtoninstitute.org, the website, and also you can tune into the podcast from this program through futuresense.it within about 24 hours or so, or earlier, for an edited version of all of today's show, and particularly the interviews with John L. Petersen. And I have quite a bit more of them, so we may actually just put them on the podcast, and we may also play some next week. Don't know yet, with everything up in the air. See how we go. We're just going with the flow. But you can check out fs.futuresense.it for the podcast and more information there about John Petersen.
You've been listening to Future Sense, a podcast edited from the radio show of the same name, broadcast on Bay FM in Byron Bay, Australia, at bayfm.org. Future Sense is available on iTunes and SoundCloud. The future is here now. It's just not evenly distributed.